Hey guys, tonight you find yourself just outside a medieval town at dusk, with cold stone walls rising ahead of you and damp straw clinging to the edges of the road. Smoke hangs in the rafters of nearby cottages, distant bells tremble through river mist, and mud grips your boots with the quiet determination of a tax collector. A torch gutters beside the gate. Horse breath steams in the winter air, and somewhere close by, a cart full of something deeply agricultural reminds you that medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You draw your cloak tighter, feeling the damp wool scratch your neck, and you know, with gentle honesty, that you probably would not last a week out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the town gate creaks open, comment where you are listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the long brown hush before nightfall, where the road narrows between ditches filled with pale water and the town before you seems to breathe through its stones. The walls are not grand in the way songs promise. They are patched, stained, damp at the base, and dark where generations of smoke have rubbed against them like old hands. The gatehouse leans above the road, heavy with oak beams and iron straps, its upper window showing the dull orange blink of a brazier. Beneath it, a guard in a fur-lined cloak watches you with the tired suspicion of a man who has smelled too many strangers in one lifetime, and has found most of them disappointing. Behind you, the fields sink into shadow. Ahead, through the open gate, the town gathers itself in layers of smell: wet wool, horse sweat, wood smoke, river fog, spilled ale, cabbage pottage cooling in iron pots, the sour bite of refuse buried too shallow and remembered too well by the evening air. You do not simply arrive at a medieval town, you're announced to it by your nose, and your nose, poor loyal servant that it is, receives the news bravely. A dung cart creaks past you, its wheels sinking into the rutted road with a soft, defeated sound. The carter sits hunched under a hood patched with brown wool, flicking the reins at a mule who appears to have chosen a life of philosophical resistance. The load is covered with straw, though not enough straw for anyone's comfort. A thin mist rises from the river beyond the wall, curling around the cart and the gateposts, and the guard touches 2 fingers to a little bundle hanging at his belt. It is a charm of dried rosemary, rue, and perhaps a scrap of cloth once pressed near a saint's reliquary, though no one can quite agree whether it touched a holy bone, a bishop's sleeve, or merely the bottom of someone's travelling bag. You step aside, letting the cart groan through first. The smell rolls after it like an invisible procession. The guard sniffs once, makes a face, and mutters that such vapours are not good after sunset. He's not joking. Around you, people believe that bad air can do more than offend. It can creep into the body, unbalance the humours, sour the blood, carry fever, invite melancholy, or mark a place where death has recently loosened its belt and sat down for supper. Some swear that a foul smell can cling to a man's cloak and follow him home like an unpaid debt. Others say corruption rises from ditches, marshes, rotting meat, old rushes, sick rooms, and graves, especially when the air is still and the moon is thin. Even now, it is hard to tell whether they fear the stink itself, the sickness that often walks beside it, or the awful thought that the world may be spoiling quietly, one breath at a time. The guard asks your business. You give the name of the manor where you hope to find shelter, and he tilts his head toward the inner street. There is a toll to pay, of course. There is always a toll. Medieval roads may be muddy, dangerous, and scented like a goat's final argument, but someone still finds a way to charge you for using them. You hand over a small coin, warmed by your palm, and he drops it into a wooden bowl beside a scrap of wax tablet marked by the town clerk. His fingers are cracked from cold, blackened at the nails, and wrapped at one knuckle with linen. He smells of smoke, onions, and damp leather. Not clean, exactly, but human, and in this place, human smells are nearly comforting when compared with ditches, hides, drains, and whatever has been abandoned under the bridge. You duck beneath the gate. The iron teeth of the portcullis hang above you like a frozen comb. Your boots strike cobbles slick with evening damp, and the first close houses press in on either side, their upper stories leaning toward one another as though sharing gossip over your head. Rushlight glows behind horn windows. A woman throws a basin of grey water into the gutter and murmurs an apology to no one in particular. 2 apprentices carry a shutterboard inside before curfew, laughing until the smell from the gutter catches them and makes one cough into his sleeve. Somewhere deeper in the town, a bell marks the hour from a chapel tower, slow and hollow, and the sound seems to spread through the smoke rather than the air. The street is narrow, and its centre channel carries the day's small sins downhill cabbage leaves, ashes, straw, fish scales, stable sweepings, and rainwater with ambitions far above its station. A pig noses near a doorway until a boy waves it away with a broom. No one looks shocked by this. Order exists here, but it is a practical, tired order, the kind that admits pigs have opinions and gutters have duties. You keep to the raised stones near the walls, lifting your hem when the mud deepens, and you breathe through the corner of your cloak because you have seen others do it. The wool smells of wet road and your own cold breath. It is not pleasant, but it is yours. Near a roadside shrine tucked into the wall, a candle burns before a painted saint whose face has been darkened by years of soot. Someone has left a posy of dried lavender below it, tied with thread. Someone else has placed a chipped onion there, cut in half, its sharp scent rising cleanly through the damp. The onion is not an offering in the grand manner of silver, wax, or bread. It is humbler, stranger, and perhaps more useful. There are those who believe onion draws corruption from the air, that it drinks poison from a room, that it guards sleepers when plague walks softly through lanes. No one can quite agree whether this works, but the onion waits with great confidence, which is more than can be said for many physicians. You pause beside the shrine, warming your hands briefly over the candle's tiny heat. The flame shivers, bends, recovers. A woman in a blue hood crosses herself as she passes and presses a cloth to her nose. Her cloth is stained with something dark and sweet. Perhaps vinegar, perhaps wine, perhaps an herb steeped until it surrendered. She does not meet your eyes. Fear in this town is not always loud. Sometimes it is folded into linen. Sometimes it hangs from a belt in a bundle of rue. Sometimes is the way a man steps away from a puddle because the smell rising from it feels too thick, too warm, too alive for winter. You move on as the dust tightens. The houses breathe smoke from their roof holes, and soot-black rafters show through open upper windows. You hear bowls being set down, a baby fussing somewhere out of sight, a wooden latch dropped into place, a prayer spoken quickly before supper. Pottage thickens in a pot near one threshold, smelling of leeks, peas, and old bacon. Coarse bread rests on a board, and a tired husband tears it with both hands while his wife shakes fresh rushes near the doorway, scattering them over the floor to sweeten the room. Beneath the new rushes, lie older scraps, damp and trodden, holding memories of spilled ale, dog hair, bones, crumbs, and winter mud. Freshness is often only the top layer of things. Still, there is comfort here. A beeswax candle in a window gives off a cleaner scent than tallow. A horse in a stable snorts softly into hay. A girl above the lane hums as she closes a shutter, and the tune falls like a thread through the darkening street. You follow the main way toward the manor hall, where you have been told travellers may sleep if the steward feels generous. The dogs feel lazy, and your luck has not taken ill from the weather. Behind you. The gate creaks as it closes for the night, shutting out the fields, the mist, and the last pale ribbon of road. Before you, the town smells settle around you like an unwelcome blanket, heavy but warm in its own peculiar way, and you begin to understand why. In a world where sickness is invisible, and death often arrives without explaining itself, a foul breath of air can feel like a warning whispered directly into the bones. You reach the manor hall just as the last of the day drains from the sky, and the doorway receives you with a groan of hinges, a breath of warmer air, and the mingled smell of smoke, old rushes, damp cloaks, and supper waiting too long in wooden bowls. After the town street, it almost feels like kindness. Almost. The threshold stone is worn by generations of boots, and when you step across it, your soles leave little half-moons of mud that join all the other half-moons already drying there. No one seems offended. A hall floor in winter is less a floor than a public record of everyone's weather. Inside, this space rises high and shadowed, with soot-black rafters vanishing above the firelight. A central hearth burns low, sending smoke upward toward a roof vent that accepts some of it and politely ignores the rest. Along the walls, benches hold servants, travellers, 2 sleepy hounds, and a wool merchant wrapped so tightly in his cloak that he resembles a sack with opinions. Near the raised dais, the steward speaks with an ink-stained clerk beside a horn lantern, a wooden tally stick, and a cup of ale that looks as though it has already heard several complaints. You wait with your hood still up while the steward looks you over. He asks where you come from, whether you carry letters, whether you have paid at the gate, and whether your boots have been anywhere unwholesome. This last question is not entirely foolish. In a world where bad air is blamed for fever and decay, bad mud is viewed with similar suspicion. Roads collect all manner of insults: dung, standing water, graveyard clay, market sweepings, and the soft black filth beside town walls. Some swear that evil vapours ride into houses on damp hems and boot soles, climbing from rush to cloak to breath while honest people sleep. Others say it is nonsense, though they still scrape their shoes carefully before entering. The steward points you toward a place near the lower end of the hall, not too near the hearth, not too near the door, and not near enough to the dais to confuse hope with social advancement. You thank him and move among the benches. The rushes underfoot whisper and crackle. Fresh reeds have been scattered over the old ones, and herbs are mixed among them: sweet flag, lavender, meadow sweet, perhaps a little rosemary crushed by passing feet. For a moment, the scent rises green and bright, like a summer field remembered in a winter room. Then your heel shifts and something older answers from beneath: sour ale, grease, damp straw, dog, ash, a ghost of fish. This is how comfort works here. It is layered. The newest rushes are a promise. The older rushes are a confession. A servant girl, sleeves rolled above her wrists, comes through with a rake and stirs the edges where the floor meets the wall. She works calmly, with the patience of one who has learned that noble halls, like noble families, are best not examined too closely in corners. She gathers blackened straw and crumbs onto a wooden shovel, and one hound lifts its head as if deeply moved by archaeology. The past is rich down there, though perhaps not rich in the way poets prefer. A place is made for you beside a pilgrim with a patched satchel and a potter whose hands are red from clay and cold. The pilgrim wears a dull pewter badge shaped like a scallop shell. His cloak smells of rain, road dust, and garlic. The potter smells of riverbank and smoke. You smell, by now, of wet wool and humble regret. Together you form a little community of travel, each of you steaming gently in the hall's warmth, which would be touching if it were not so aromatic. A wooden bowl is brought to you, filled with pottage thickened by peas and barley, with a strip of bacon floating in it like a relic of better decisions. Beside it comes coarse bread and a cup of small ale, safer than many waters and less inclined to introduce itself with worms. You eat slowly, letting the heat settle into your hands. Around you, spoons scrape bowls. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Someone near the wall mutters that the old rushes should have been changed after the last wet spell. For dampness breeds foul airs, and foul airs breed little devils in the lungs. No one can quite agree whether the devils are true spirits, invisible corruption, or simply a convenient way to describe whatever makes a person wake with fever. The cougher crosses himself anyway. Above the hearth, bunches of herbs hang from a beam, drying in the smoke. They are meant for cooking, for physic, for scenting linen, for keeping moths from wool, and perhaps for frightening away whatever cannot be seen but can certainly be blamed. Rue hangs there too, bitter and strong, its leaves grey-green in the fire glow. An old woman tells a boy not to sleep with his mouth open beneath bad rafters, lest night air crawl in and sour his heart. The boy closes his mouth at once, then opens it again to ask whether bad air can climb down chimneys. She says it can climb anywhere it is not invited, which seems unfairly talented for air. You lean back against the wall and watch the hall soften toward night. The clerk trims the horn lantern, a servant sets tallow candles near the dais, though one beeswax taper burns beside the steward's writing board, cleaner and sweeter, a small luxury shining like good manners. Smoke crawls beneath the roof, shadows gather under tables. The hounds settle with a sigh, their paws twitching in dreams of meat scraps and legal ownership of the floor. Near the doorway, cloaks drip into a wooden tub, and the smell of wet wool thickens again, steady as weather. The fear of foul smells is not separate from daily life here. It sits with people at supper, it lies under the rushes, it rises when the fire burns low, or the wind presses smoke back into the hall. It is the fear that hidden rot means hidden danger, that sweetness can mask corruption, that comfort can be only a clean scattering laid over something old and damp. And yet you are warm. The hall murmurs around you like a great sleepy animal. The bell you heard at the gate sounds again through the wall, faint and round, and as the half-burned candle near the steward sinks lower, you pull your cloak about your knees, breathe through the smoke and herbs, and let the layered scents of the hall fold slowly over you. The hall does not let you sleep yet. Before the benches are cleared, the steward sends several travellers back into the lane, not unkindly, but with the firm expression of a man whose charity has already been stretched to the width of a poor blanket. There is space, he says, at the alehouse by the crooked sign, if the widow there has not filled her loft with drovers. The pilgrim beside you nods as though this is expected, gathers his patched satchel, and rises with a sigh that smells faintly of garlic. You follow him out through the manor door, carrying the hall smoke in your cloak and the memory of old rushes under your boots. Night has settled over the town. The lane glistens beneath torchlight, and the gutter speaks in soft, unpleasant trickles. Your breath comes pale before your face. Somewhere behind you, the manor hounds bark once, then decide against ambition. A smaller dog, narrow-ribbed and brown, slips from shadow near the doorway and pads after you at a respectful distance, as if your boots have become a matter of professional interest. You tell yourself it is fond of travellers. More likely. It has detected the bacon ghost from your pottage. The alehouse is not far. Its sign hangs from an iron hook, painted with a faded red cup that looks less like a cup than a warning. Warmth spills through the cracks around the door, along with smoke, laughter, and the yeasty breath of ale. You duck inside, and heat prickles your cheeks. The room is low, with beams dark as burned crust and walls yellowed by years of hearth smoke. Rushes cover the floor here too, thinner than in the manor hall and more honest about their condition. Men and women sit shoulder to shoulder, cups in hand, cloaks steaming, faces shining in the firelight. The widow who keeps the place stands behind a trestle board with rolled sleeves and a linen cap pinned tight. She has the sharp eyes of someone who can measure both thirst and coin from across a crowded room. She gives you ale in a wooden cup, dark and sour, then points to a space near the wall. You sit beside the pilgrim, the potter from the hall, and a carter whose cloak smells strongly enough of stable to deserve its own name day. The brown dog noses in before the door closes and settles beneath the bench, inspecting the rushes with deep scholarly concern. The talk around you drifts, as talk in warm rooms does, from prices to roads to weather to sickness. A woman with a fur-lined hood says the wind from the river has turned foul these past 3 evenings. A drover answers that river wind is always foul, especially when fishmongers have opinions about storage. The pilgrim leans forward and says he once passed through a village where the air smelled sweet, before half the houses fell ill. Sweet like apples left too long under straw. No one laughs at that. Fire cracks softly. Some swear that sweetness is worse than stink when it comes from the wrong place. Rot can turn honeyed before it turns black. Sick rooms can be washed with herbs and still breathe danger through the shutters. A graveyard after rain can smell green, almost fresh, and still make old women hurry past with prayers pressed between their teeth. No one can quite agree whether bad smell carries sickness itself or merely announces that sickness is waiting nearby, like a bailiff with patience. Yet almost everyone here behaves as if the nose is a watchman posted at the gate of the body. The widow sets a small dish of sliced onion near the hearth. It is not for eating, she says, when the carter reaches toward it. He draws back with the wounded dignity of a man denied vegetables he did not truly want. The onions are there to draw badness from the room, to catch what rises from damp cloaks and tired lungs. Their sharp scent cuts through ale, sweat, and smoke, clean as a knife. The potter says his aunt placed onions in every corner during a fever year, and by morning they had gone dark. The drover says onions go dark because onions are dramatic. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but all of them look at the dish with a little respect. Near the hearth, an elderly mason with white stubble speaks of plague years remembered from his father's father, when people burned juniper in doorways and carried pomanders stuffed with cloves if they could afford such grand little treasures. Poorer folk tied herbs into cloth, soaked rags in vinegar, or held a crust of bread before the nose, which seems a sad use for bread, but perhaps better than the alternative. He says some physicians advised avoiding marsh air, crowded beds, spoiled meat, and grief apparently had a scent too. The carter suggests it smells like unpaid rent. The widow says that is marriage. The joke passes softly through the room. You drink your ale, feeling it warm the hollow places in you. It tastes of grain, smoke, and sourness at the back of the tongue. But it is safer than many wells and friendlier than the gutter outside. On the table lie coarse bread, a heel of cheese, and a trencher stained with gravy. The pilgrim breaks his bread carefully, murmuring a blessing over it, then touches the pewter scallop badge on his cloak. He says that on pilgrimage roads. You learn to trust bells, clean springs, and kitchens that do not smell too sweet. The room grows slower. The fire lowers itself into red. Smoke hangs near the beams in a blue-brown veil. A young man by the door lifts his sleeve to his nose when someone opens the latch and lets in a ribbon of river air. The widow snaps for the door to be closed, not because of cold alone, but because night air has a reputation. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people fear the darkness itself or the damp breath it carries from ditches, drains, marshes, and places best left unnamed after supper. You sit quietly as the arguments soften into murmurs. The onion dish keeps its post near the hearth. The brown dog presses its back against your boot and sighs like a tiny bellows. Outside, the chapel bell sounds once through the lanes, muffled by mist and timber, and you remember the guard's herb charm, the shrine candle, the old rushes beneath fresh reeds. Here in the alehouse, wrapped in smoke and human warmth. You begin to understand that bad smells frighten people because they make the unseen feel near. They give danger a doorway. They turn air itself into something that can enter you. So you cup your ale with both hands, lower your chin into your cloak, and breathe as gently as you can while the room settles around you. Sour, smoky, wary, and strangely kind. You wake before the room fully becomes morning, in that grey hour when the fire is mostly ash. The beams are only shapes above you, and every sleeper in the alehouse seems to be breathing through wool, smoke, and old dreams. For a moment you do not know where you are. Then the sour ale smell, the onion dish near the hearth, the damp cloak over your knees, and the brown dog curled against your boot all return to you like witnesses called one by one. The chapel bell sounds through the mist, slow and muffled, marking an hour that feels too early for any honest creature except monks, milkmaids, and people with unfortunate responsibilities. The widow moves quietly among the benches, stirring the embers with an iron poker. A red glow opens beneath the ash. Someone coughs. Someone mutters a prayer without quite waking. The pilgrim beside you sits up at once, as if pulled by the bell itself, and touches his scallop badge before rubbing sleep from his eyes. You rise stiffly. Your cloak is colder on the outside than the inside, and your boots, though dry enough to wear, have hardened overnight into shapes that suggest they may now own your feet. The brown dog stands when you do, stretches with great ceremony, and sniffs your left boot as if reading a letter written in mud. You whisper that there is nothing there for him. He clearly disagrees. Dogs in medieval towns are not sentimental companions so much as wandering officials of the nose, inspecting scraps, secrets, and travellers with equal seriousness. Outside, dawn lies pale over the lane. Mist clings low along the cobbles, and the gutter has not rested. It moves steadily downhill with the thin confidence of something that knows the town was built to help it leave. You step into the street behind the pilgrim and the potter, while the widow throws a handful of damp rushes from the doorway into a barrow. The onion dish remains near the hearth behind you, guarding whatever badness it believes it has trapped. No one can quite agree whether onions truly draw sickness from the air, but no one seems eager to throw them away too soon. The town is waking by smell before sight. Smoke begins first. Small blue threads from roof holes and chimney pots. Then comes bread, coarse loaves warming near ovens. Then the sharpness of chopped leeks, the sour tang of yesterday's ale, the warm animal smell from stables, and finally the heavier breath from the midden lane ahead. You do not need directions. The midden lane announces itself like a herald with no sense of shame. You turn into it because the pilgrim says it is the quickest way toward the lower bridge, and because medieval shortcuts often punish optimism. On either side of the lane, houses lean close, their upper floors nearly touching. Buckets appear at doorways. Women in wool gowns sweep hearth ash into piles. A boy with bare red hands carries a basket of vegetable peelings and bones, toward a common heap beyond a fence of woven hurdles. The midden itself rises there in uneven layers: straw, ash, broken pottery, cabbage stalks, fish heads, stable sweepings, and the mysterious dark matter from which towns seem to manufacture regret. A man with a forked stick turns part of the heap while holding his face away. Another scatters fresh straw over the worst of it, as if putting a blanket over a sleeping bear. Some towns pay men to cart such waste beyond the walls, especially before feast days or visits from important persons, because even a lord who tolerates unpaid taxes will object to being welcomed by a hill of rotting turnips. There are rules, fines, and manor court complaints about dumping filth in the wrong place. Though from the look of the lane, the wrong place has many enthusiastic supporters. The brown dog trots ahead, delighted beyond measure. He pauses at the midden fence, sniffs deeply, and looks back at you as though he has discovered a cathedral. You keep moving. The pilgrim lifts a cloth to his nose, not grandly scented like a rich man's pomander, but dampened perhaps with vinegar or ale. He says bad heaps should never be stirred before the sun has strength, for the morning vapours rise hungry. The potter says heaps are stirred when men are paid to stir them. Some swear that foul air is weakest at noon and strongest in the hour before dawn, when cold presses corruption close to the ground. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such sayings come from observation, fear, or the simple human wish to give danger a timetable. At the next turning, the fishmongers begin opening their stalls. Their boards are slick from washing, and baskets of river fish lie silver in the dim light, eyes round and glassy as tiny moons. A woman with sleeves pinned high sprinkles salt over a tray while arguing with a boy about the price of eels. Smoked fish hangs from hooks beneath an awning, its scent deep and dark, more welcome than the raw river smell, but still stern enough to wake the dead if placed too near a pillow. The fishmongers keep buckets of water close, rinse their knives often, and shout at anyone who lets dogs too near the boards. Your brown companion is told exactly what several saints think of him, and retreats under a cart with theatrical innocence. Near the fish stalls, charms hang above a doorway red thread, a pierced coin, and a little bundle of herbs tied with linen. The potter tells you some households hang rue by the door to keep corruption from entering, while others burn rosemary after a sick visitor leaves. A fishwife adds, without looking up, that rosemary is also useful for husbands who forget errands, because if thrown hard enough, it improves memory. The pilgrim smiles into his cloth. The joke is small, dry, and gone quickly, like a spark in damp straw. You pass on toward the riverside, where the lane broadens and the air changes again. Here the tanner's quarter waits at the edge of town respectability. You do not enter fully yet, only pass where its first smells reach across the road: wet hides, smoke, lime, stale urine collected for working leather, and river mud stirred under planks. It is powerful enough to make your eyes water. Yet men are already at work there, sleeves rolled, aprons stiff, hands moving with practiced calm. The town may wrinkle its nose, but it needs shoes, belts, harness, gloves, buckets, straps, scabbards, and book covers. Usefulness often smells worse than idleness. The bell sounds again, clearer now as the mist thins. Light gathers along roof lines. The midden lane behind you steams faintly where the first weak sun touches it. You look back once and see the town waking into its ordinary courage, sweeping, rinsing, salting, carting, covering, praying, bargaining, enduring. People fear bad smells because bad smells tell the truth too bluntly. They reveal what is rotting, what is crowded, what is hidden under fresh straw. What labour must be done again tomorrow? You draw your cloak close, breathe through wool sweetened only by smoke and travel, and follow the pilgrim onward while the brown dog, having forgiven the fishmongers, returns faithfully to your boots. You leave the midden lane behind. though it does not entirely leave you. Its memory clings to the lower edge of your cloak, mingling with the sharper breath of the tanner's quarter and the cold, clean damp rising from the river. The pilgrim leads you across the lower bridge, where frost whitens the planks in narrow stripes, and the water below moves darkly between posts green with slime. Behind you, the town wall lifts through thinning mist, patched and soot-stained, and the bell that woke you seems to follow from tower to tower, passed along by air, stone, and habit. Beyond the bridge, the road bends toward the monastery. It stands a little apart from the town, as monasteries often do, close enough to sell prayers, buy grain, and hear gossip, but far enough away to pretend at holy distance. Its outer wall is plain, pale with frost along the top, and the gate is set beneath a small arch where a wooden cross hangs dark against the morning. Smoke rises from within, steadier and sweeter than the town smoke, carrying hints of bread ovens, damp ash, and something herbal, green and sharp. You arrive with the pilgrim, the potter, and the brown dog, though the dog stops at the threshold as if he suspects monks have rules about joy. A lay brother opens the gate after a long scraping of bolts. He wears a wool habit belted with rope and looks at your boots before he looks at your face, which, by now, feels fair. Your boots have lived a busy life since dusk. The brother notices the mud, the road, the dog, perhaps the ghost of Midden Lane, and his expression becomes careful. He lets you into the outer court, but not far. You stand beneath a covered walk while he goes to fetch someone with authority. The stones under your feet are cold, swept clean, and scattered with a little sand to keep them from slickness. A row of buckets rests beneath the eaves for washing hands and soles. Beside them lies a bundle of birch twigs, a scraping knife, and a shallow pan of water darkened by many travellers' attempts at becoming acceptable. The pilgrim kneels without complaint and begins cleaning his shoes. You follow. The brown dog watches, deeply disappointed that perfectly interesting mud is being removed. The monk who comes to meet you is narrow, middle-aged, and wrapped in a cloak lined with old fur at the collar. His sleeves smell strongly of vinegar. He carries a folded cloth in one hand and a small bunch of herbs in the other, rosemary, rue, and perhaps wormwood, bound with thread. His eyes are calm but suspicious, like a cat considering theology. He greets the pilgrim first, then the potter, then you, then the dog last and with the least conviction. Travellers may warm themselves in the guest house, he says, but first each must wash, scrape, and stand a little while in the open air. He speaks gently, yet no one mistakes the rule for a suggestion. The monastery has seen fevers before. It has buried brothers in winter ground. It has received men who arrived cheerful at noon and burning by Compline. Bad air is not welcome here, nor bad cloth, nor bad bedding, nor bad news if it can be delayed until after prayers. You wash your hands in cold water that bites your fingers. The monk offers a second cloth dampened with vinegar, and you press it to your palms, wrists, and the edge of your cloak. The smell is fierce, bright, almost painful after the soft rot of the lane. It clears your head so abruptly that you feel briefly wiser, though only briefly. Some swear that vinegar cuts corruption in the air, that it sharpens the breath and keeps pestilence from settling in the body. No one can quite agree whether it guards the lungs, comforts the mind, or simply makes everyone nearby smell like a pickled saint. Still, the monk uses it with solemn confidence, and confidence, in such places, is half a medicine. He touches the herb bundle to the lintel above the guest-house door, murmuring words under his breath. It may be a prayer, a blessing, or a reminder to himself not to trust anyone who has crossed a town before breakfast. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about monks. Some call them learned men with libraries and physis gardens. Others call them professional warriors in sandals. This one appears to be both. He asks whether anyone in the alehouse coughed blood, whether the town gate was crowded, whether you passed the sick lane, whether the midden was being stirred, and whether the dog belongs to you. You answer as best you can. The last question is the hardest. The dog sits neatly beside your boot, wearing the expression of an animal who has recently selected a parish. Inside the guest house, warmth greets you in a tidier fashion than the alehouse did. The floor is swept stone, strewn only lightly with fresh rushes that smell of meadow and frost. A small hearth burns near one wall, and above it hang drying mittens, a pilgrim's damp hood, and strips of linen. Benches line the room. A trestle table holds coarse bread, a bowl of salt, a pot of thin ale, and a dish of beans cooked soft enough for tired teeth. Near the window, beeswax candles burn before a small painted image of St. Roch, who is invoked by some against plague, though no one can quite agree whether the saint favours clean air, loyal dogs, or merely people wise enough to avoid crowded inns. The monk gives you bread and ale, then places the vinegar cloth near the hearth to steam faintly. He opens the shutter a crack, though the air outside is cold, saying stale warmth is worse than honest winter. The draught moves through the room, lifting smoke and herb scent together. It touches your cheeks, slips beneath your collar, and makes the fire lean sideways. The potter mutters that monks would invite January into bed if January promised to carry off sickness. The pilgrim smiles but says nothing. For a while, you rest. The monastery bell marks another hour, nearer and deeper now than the town chapel bell, and its sound rolls through the guest house beams as if the wood itself remembers prayer. Beyond the wall, brothers move quietly from task to task, carrying water, chopping kindling, sweeping the cloister walk, checking the oven, turning the pages of service books with fingers stained by ink and cold. The rhythm is careful, almost fragrant in its order. Here, fear of bad smells becomes discipline. Wash the bowl, air the blanket, burn the herbs, bless the door, scrape the mud, trust God, but do not trust damp straw. You sit with your cup between both hands, watching the suspicious monk inspect a traveller's cloak by the doorway. His vinegar sleeves pass through the room like a warning made useful. Outside, the brown dog finally slips in, settles just inside the threshold, and sighs as though he too has accepted monastic reform. You breathe the sharp, clean sting of vinegar, the mellow smoke, the beeswax, the bread, and the faint road smell still hidden in your wool. And for the first time since entering the town, the air feels not safe exactly, but watched. The monk with the vinegar sleeves does not leave you long beside the hearth. After you have eaten your bread and beans, and after the thin ale is warmed just enough in your hands to become less apologetic, he returns to the guest-house door and beckons with 2 fingers. The pilgrim rises at once. The potter follows more slowly, brushing crumbs from his tunic. You stand too, because in a monastery, when a monk beckons, it is usually wiser to move before the bell adds its opinion. Outside, the air is bright with cold. Morning has fully opened over the cloister roofs, and frost shines in the seams of the stone like pale thread. You step beneath a covered walk where the pillars are worn smooth by sleeves. Weather and generations of quiet feet. The monastery feels less silent than ordered. Somewhere a bucket knocks against a well curb. Somewhere a brother coughs, then clears his throat in embarrassment, as if even a cough must ask permission here. From the chapel comes a low murmur of voices, the last tale of a prayer folding itself into the day. The monk leads you toward the physic garden. It lies behind a low wall, square and careful, with beds edged in woven willow. Even in winter, the place holds a dry green scent, as though summer has been pressed into the soil and asked to wait. Rosemary grows dark and stubborn near the sunniest stones. Rue lifts its bitter leaves under a little shelter of sticks. Lavender, cut and bundled from warmer months, hangs beneath the eaves in faded purple-grey bunches. Sage, hyssop, wormwood. And southernwood sleep in their beds, trimmed close but not forgotten. A small bay tree stands wrapped in straw, looking like a noble prisoner. The monk touches each plant as he names it, not grandly, but with the familiar care of someone greeting household servants. Rosemary for remembrance, warmth, and the clearing of stale rooms. Rue for corruption, though its bitterness has never made it popular at supper. Lavender for linen, sleep, and the sweetening of chambers. Sage for the throat. Wormwood for troublesome bellies and troublesome insects. Some swear that carrying rue beneath the cloak keeps pestilence from settling on the skin. Others say lavender under the pillow draws out heavy dreams. No one can quite agree whether rosemary truly strengthens the mind, yet every student in the monastery seems to sniff it before copying difficult Latin, which may be faith, habit, or quiet desperation. You breathe carefully. The garden air is not perfumed like a noble lady's coffer. It is sharper, leafier, more practical. These are not flowers kept only to please the eye. They are tools, as useful as iron keys, ale pots, or wool blankets. Their scents are treated like little invisible fences set against sickness. In this world, where no one sees the tiny causes of fever, smell becomes a kind of map. Sweet herbs mark safety. Sour rot marks danger, smoke may cleanse, vinegar may cut, fresh air may carry away what stale warmth gathers in its corners. The monk opens a small door into the infirmary passage, and warmth breathes out. You step inside, lowering your voice without being told. The room beyond is long and plain, with narrow beds set along the walls, each covered by wool blankets tucked tight. A brazier glows near the centre, and above it hangs a little iron pot in which water steams with rosemary and bay. The scent rises through the room, green and warm, softening the sharper smells of illness, old linen, salve, and human fear. Beeswax candles burn near a shelf of jars. Their light turns the glassy surfaces of ointments and syrups into small amber moons. Two brothers move between the beds. One carries a basin of warm water. Another shakes out linen near an open shutter, letting in a thin blade of winter air. A sick man sleeps with a cloth tied around his head, his beard damp at the chin. Near him hangs a pomander of pierced metal, though it is not as fine as those owned by great lords. This one is simple, dented, and filled with cloves, dried rose, and perhaps a pinch of ground spice stretched farther than its price would prefer. The monk says it was given by a merchant after he recovered from a fever, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether he recovered because of prayer, herbs, luck, or because the fever simply grew bored and left. On a table near the wall lie the tools of care: a horn spoon, linen strips, a mortar and pestle, little cloth bags of dried plants, a pot of honey, a knife for cutting roots, and a jar of leeches kept in clean water. The leeches drift slowly, dark and thoughtful. You try not to look too closely. The potter does look, then immediately regrets acquiring knowledge. The monk notices and says leeches are God's creatures too. The potter murmurs that God has a wide imagination. The infirmera, an older brother with ink stains on one sleeve and salve on the other, crushes lavender and rosemary in the mortar. He adds a splash of vinegar, and the scent leaps upward, bright enough to sting your nose. This mixture, he explains, may be set near a bed, rubbed on wrists, or sprinkled on rushes when the air grows heavy. He does not claim certainty. Few honest healers do. He says only that foulness weakens the spirit, sweetness steadies it, and clean habits are pleasing to both heaven and the lungs. It is hard to argue with such tidy theology. You pass into a smaller chamber where spare blankets hang from pegs, and the rushes are changed more often than in any hall or alehouse you have seen. A young novice scatters dried meadow sweet over the fresh reeds, then bends to sweep the old ones into a basket. He works with solemn concentration, as though removing last week's damp straw is a battle against the devil conducted at floor level. The brown dog, having followed despite all monastic intentions, sniffs the basket. The novice whispers that dogs can smell death before men do. Some swear this is true. Others say dogs smell supper, fear, and unattended shoes, which covers most mysteries. At last the monk leads you back toward the cloister. Your cloak now carries new layers: vinegar, rosemary, lavender, smoke, and beneath them all the stubborn memory of road and town. The bell sounds again, deep and measured, calling the brothers to their next office. You stand a moment in the garden doorway while winter sunlight touches the herb beds and the monastery moves around you in quiet purpose. You begin to understand that these people do not fight bad smells only because they dislike them. They fight them because scent is one of the few warnings the world gives before danger becomes visible. So they hang herbs, steam water, open shutters, bless thresholds, and lay fresh rushes over cold stone, building small islands of clean breath in a world that is always trying, softly and patiently, to rot. You leave the monastery when the sun has climbed just high enough to loosen the frost from the cloister stones, and the monk with the vinegar sleeves watches you go as if he is releasing a mildly suspicious parcel into the world. He gives the pilgrim a blessing, gives the potter a small twist of dried rosemary, and gives you a square of linen touched with vinegar and rue. The brown dog receives nothing, yet trots after you with the serene confidence of a creature who considers every road a banquet not yet properly opened. The path back toward town is clearer now. Morning has strengthened. The river mist has lifted into thin white threads, and the town wall stands less ghostly than before, though not much cleaner. At the bridge, carts have begun to queue, their wheels rimmed with mud. A woman drives 2 geese before her with a stick, and the geese complain in voices that suggest they have studied law. A man with a sack of onions over his shoulder pauses to spit into the river and then crosses himself. Perhaps for the river, perhaps for the onions, perhaps for the general state of creation. At the gate, the guard from last evening is gone, replaced by a younger man whose nose is wrapped in a wool scarf scented with something sharp. He takes toll from a spice seller, waves through a basket maker, and frowns at a drover whose boots are too honest about where they have been. You pass beneath the portcullis again, carrying the monastery's herbs in your cloak, and the town receives you with its old mixture of warmth and warning: smoke, bread, dung, fish, wet timber, human breath. But today, through the sour and heavy town air, something brighter wins itself forward. The market is gathering in the square. You follow it by sound first: wooden shutters dropped on trestles, iron scales clinking, chickens objecting to commerce, merchants calling prices with the weary music of men who know every buyer claims poverty until dessert appears. Then the square opens before you, broad and uneven, paved in stones dark with damp. Stalls stand beneath patched awnings, baskets of apples, leeks, onions, and walnuts crowd beside bolts of wool, smoked fish, leather straps, clay cups, iron nails, wooden spoons, and little cakes of tallow wrapped in cloth. A baker's boy carries loaves on a board over his shoulder, and people lean aside because bread has the right of way when warm. Here, scent becomes trade, not merely the unavoidable breath of the town, but something shaped, priced, weighed, and promised. A spice merchant stands behind small bowls of pepper, cloves, cinnamon, mace, and grains of paradise, each portion guarded as carefully as coins. The colours are dark and rich, brown, red, gold, and black, like bits of far-off heat brought into a cold northern morning. Their smell rises in warm little clouds, so strong that for a moment the square seems less muddy, less crowded, almost grand. The merchant says his cloves come by way of Venice, though no one can quite agree whether anything expensive truly comes from where the seller says it does. A woman in a green hood lifts a clove to her nose and closes her eyes. She does not buy it. She only borrows the dream of buying it. Beside her, a richer matron chooses a little packet of mixed spice, paying with a face that suggests both pride and injury. Spices do more than season pottage or disguise meat kept a day too long. They sweeten breath, scent gloves, perfume linen, and guard the body against foul vapours, at least in the minds of those who can afford them. Some swear that cloves held in the mouth keep sickness from entering with the air. Others prefer cinnamon, saying it warms the heart. The poor, who must be more inventive, chew parsley, onion, mint, or hope. Near the spice stall, another merchant sells pomanders. Some are no more than oranges pierced with cloves, costly little suns studded with dark stars. Others are metal globes hung from chains, pierced with tiny holes and filled with musk, amber, rose, dried herbs, or spice powder. A noble servant in a fur-trimmed cap turns one between finger and thumb, testing the hinge. The merchant assures him it is fine work, fit for a lady's girdle, strong against bad air, crowded chapels, and relatives with winter coughs. The servant asks if it will also defend against his master's temper. The merchant says, very gravely, that such a charm would require a bishop and 2 barrels of frankincense. You stand close enough to feel the little drift of scent from the pomanders, sweet, warm, animal, floral, strange. It is not the clean green breath of the monastery garden. It is wealth made invisible. A rich person can carry a private weather around the body, a small cloud of cloven rose between the nose and the world. In a town where gutters speak freely and sickness is feared in every stale corner, such sweetness is not vanity alone. It is armour, delicate and expensive, worn against what cannot be seen. The pilgrim pauses before a stall selling pewter badges, scallop shells, tiny saints, crossed keys, little ampulli for holy water, and stamped tokens from shrines near and far. The metal pieces glint softly in the pale light. A badge of St. Rot hangs beside one of St. James, and below them a row of tiny bells is meant for children, animals, or nervous travellers who prefer their protection to make a sound. The stall-keeper claims that a badge worn near the throat can keep corrupt breath from entering. Some swear that badges touched to a relic carry a sweetness no ordinary nose can detect. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such sweetness belongs to faith, memory, or the market's excellent sense of opportunity. You watch a poor woman trade 2 eggs for a scrap of dried lavender and a ribbon of red thread. She tucks both into her bodice with care. Perhaps she has a child coughing at home. Perhaps she fears the sick lane. Perhaps she simply wants her sleeping place to smell less like damp straw and more like a field in June. Medieval fear is rarely separate from ordinary hope. People buy scent because they fear death. Yes, but also because they want supper to taste warm, beds to feel kinder, linen to hold summer, and breath to seem clean when speaking close to someone loved. A gust passes through the square, stirring awnings and carrying every smell at once: pepper, fish, wet wool, horse dung, beeswax, onions, hot bread, smoke, musk, river mud, and the brown dog, who has discovered a dropped crust and now smells strongly of success. You press the vinegar linen briefly to your nose, then lower it. The market sways around you in slow, vivid motion, full of bargaining voices and careful hands. Here, bad smells are not simply endured, they are answered, with herbs, with spice, with saints, with coins, with jokes, with small fragrant defences against the old fear that the air itself may turn against you. By midday, the market has grown so crowded that the square seems less a place than a living bundle tied too tightly elbows. Baskets, cloaks, chickens, toll collectors, peddlers, pilgrims, and every smell of the town packed beneath the low winter sky. You move carefully between stalls while the brown dog drifts ahead of you, guided by a faith deeper than theology and mostly concerned with dropped bread. The pilgrim buys nothing but pauses before everything. The potter turns a clay cup in his hands and judges it silently, as potters do, with the grave pity of a man inspecting another person's mistakes. Then the rain begins. It starts as a fine grey pricking on your face, almost mist, almost nothing. A few merchants look up. A woman draws her basket cloth over her eggs. The spice seller covers his bowls with wooden lids so quickly that pepper and cloves vanish as if taken by magic, though no magic in the world is quicker than a merchant protecting costly stock. Within moments, the rain thickens, tapping on awnings, spotting wool shoulders, darkening the stones underfoot. The bright scents of the market flatten. Wet wool rises, damp leather wakes, smoke drops lower, pressed down by the weather, and every gutter finds a stronger voice. You follow the crowd's movement toward shelter, not quickly, for no one in a medieval market can move quickly unless they are either late, chased, or carrying something no one has yet noticed is stolen. The pilgrim gestures toward the nearest gatehouse arch, where several people have already gathered beneath the stone overhang. You go with him, crossing the square through rain that turns cold as soon as it touches your neck. The dog comes too, shaking himself just close enough to share his weather with your hem. Generosity wears many forms. The gatehouse is deep, narrow, and dim, built of thick stone that smells of damp lime, old smoke, iron, and men waiting through long hours. The portcullis hangs above the outer arch, black teeth against the pale rain beyond. Inside, 2 guards sit beside a brazier on a raised wooden platform, their spears leaning nearby, their cloaks lined with fur gone flat from use. One mends a strap with a bone needle. The other warms his hands over the coals and watches the road outside as if rain itself might try to enter without paying toll. Travellers press along the walls, a woman with a basket of leeks, a boy carrying candles wrapped in cloth, a wool merchant from the hall, still wrapped like a sack with opinions, a carter whose hat drips steadily onto his own knees. The air thickens at once with wet cloth, breath, mud, and the sour straw laid over the floor to catch water from boots. The straw has caught a great deal, and not all of it water. You place your feet carefully. The brown dog finds a patch near the brazier and lowers himself with the satisfied sigh of an animal who believes civilization exists mainly to produce warm floors. Beyond the arch, the road disappears into a grey curtain. The guard with the bone needle says rain from the marsh side is worst, because it drags low vapours up from black ditches and old pools where frogs sing over things better left settled. The other guard nods and spits neatly into the ashes. He says marsh fog gets into the joints, the lungs, the bedding, even the bread if a fool leaves the loaf uncovered. Some swear that fog carries the breath of drowned men and fevered cattle. Others say it is only wet air, though they still close shutters when it creeps low along the ground. No one can quite agree whether the marsh is dangerous because it smells foul, or smells foul because it is dangerous. You stand near the wall and feel the cold of the stone through your sleeve. Above you, somewhere behind a barred opening, lies the small holding room where drunkards, debtors, and unlucky quarrellers spend the night when the constable decides their homes are too comfortable. A smell leaks down from that upper chamber, old straw, iron, stale breath, damp wood, and the bitter trace of a chamber pot not emptied with monastic discipline. The pilgrim lifts his vinegar cloth. The candle boy makes a face so honest it nearly becomes a prayer. The guard notices and shrugs. Prison straw is changed when it must be, he says, and men argue about what must means. Bad air, they believe, gathers in closed places where fear sweats into blankets and sorrow lies awake against stone. A healer once told him to hang garlic in the holding room and burn juniper after a fevered prisoner left. The guard did both. The room still smelled like misery, but with ambition, even now. It is hard to tell whether the remedy failed or the room had simply chosen its profession. Rain drums harder, water runs from the arch in silver threads. A cart stops just outside, its wheel stuck in a rut already filling with brown water. The carter curses mildly, then remembers the gatehouse company, and lowers his voice into something more suitable for saints with delicate hearing. One guard rises to help after pulling his cloak tight and taking a small charm from beneath his tunic. It is a pierced hazelnut shell strung with red thread. The wool merchant says such charms guard against ague from wet ground. The leek woman says a hazelnut charm works only if cut at the right moon. The guard says it works best when people stop discussing it and help push the cart. You do not push. You remain under the arch with the pilgrim, watching the rain silver the road and blur the fields beyond the wall. Somewhere out there, low ground steams, ditches swell, rot loosens. Every scent the sun held down begins to rise. The guards fear blades, of course, and thieves, and hungry men after dark, but bad air frightens them differently. A blade has a hand behind it, a thief has a face, a foul vapour slips through cracks, under doors, into bedding, into the chest of a sleeping child. It cannot be fined at the manor court. It cannot be locked outside the gate. The brazier smoke turns blue and soft. Someone shares coarse bread. Someone else passes a little flask of ale. You take a mouthful and feel its sour warmth settle under your ribs. The rain makes the gatehouse world smaller, almost tender despite the prison smell above and the damp straw below. The dog dreams beside the coals, paws twitching. The pilgrim murmurs a prayer for dry roads. The guard returns wet to the waist and claims the cart is saved, though his boots suggest a heavy price was paid. At last the rain begins to weaken. Drips replace the steady rush. Beyond the arch, the road shines like beaten pewter, and mist lifts from the fields in pale ribbons. You wait a little longer, as everyone does, because moving too soon after rain feels like trusting a man who smiles during tax collection. The bell sounds faintly from within the town, softened by wet air. You draw the vinegar linen once more to your nose, then let it fall. The gatehouse breathes around you smoke, damp stone, straw, iron, wet wool, old fear. And when you step back toward the shining street, you carry with you the quiet knowledge that in this world, shelter is never only from rain. It is also from the unseen weather people imagine moving inside every breath. You leave the gatehouse after the rain thins to a silver breath, and the town seems newly washed only in the places that were already willing to be clean. Water runs along the centre channel of the street, carrying straw, ash, onion skins, and a single heroic cabbage leaf toward the lower lanes. The stones shine dark beneath your boots. Roofs drip. A shutter bangs softly in the wind. The brown dog trots beside you with damp ears and renewed purpose. pausing now and then to inspect puddles as if each contains a legal document requiring his seal. The pilgrim draws his cloak close and turns toward the river path. The potter says he must look at clay near the bank before the day goes far, and you follow because the road bends that way, because the rain has made the air restless, and because the strongest smells in a town are like stern abbots sooner or later. They summon you. The river announces itself before it appears, not with the clean, bright scent one imagines from songs about silver waters and maidens washing linen, but with mud, fish, wet wood, and the darker breath of everything the town has asked the current to carry away. The lane slopes downward, houses give way to sheds, workshops, stacks of timber, and low yards fenced with wattle. Smoke lies close to the ground, flattened by wet weather. Beyond a row of leaning posts, the river moves broad and brown, swollen from rain, licking at banks stamped hard by hooves and boots. Then the tanner's quarter rises round you. It is less a street than a kingdom of work. Hides hang from beams beneath open sheds, pale, dark, red-brown, dripping slowly into troughs below. Some are stretched on frames, others lie folded like heavy blankets, though no blanket ever smelled so determined to be remembered. Men in leather aprons move among pits lined with timber and stone. They stir, lift, scrape, rinse, and haul. Their sleeves are rolled, their arms wet to the elbow. Their faces calm with the endurance of people whose noses made peace with defeat years ago. The smell is immense: wet hide, lime, smoke, bark liquor, river mud, old flesh, stale urine collected in jars and tubs for the working of skins. It comes in layers, each one stepping forward politely before striking you with a plank. You press the vinegar linen to your nose, but even vinegar, proud little warrior that it is, cannot fully stand against the tanners. The pilgrim does the same. The potter merely squints, which suggests either strength of character or permanent damage. A boy carries a covered bucket through the yard, holding it away from his legs. People in town save urine for fullers and tanners, and some households sell it by the measure, a detail that gives new dignity to chamber pots and very little dignity to anything else. No one can quite agree whether this is the cleverest use of waste or proof that mankind has wandered far from Eden. The tanner who receives the bucket checks its contents with a sniff and a nod, as though appraising wine. You decide at once that there are callings in life for which you are not made, yet the work is skilled. You see that quickly, once your eyes recover from what your nose is suffering. One man scrapes a hide over a curved beam with a two-handled knife, shaving away hair and clinging matter in long, wet curls. Another lifts skins from a lime pit with wooden tongs. A third tends vats darkened with oak bark, where hides soak for weeks or months to become leather strong enough for shoes, harness, belts, scabbards, hinges, bellows, buckets, book bindings, and the countless straps that hold medieval life together. Without this place, the town would limp barefoot, horses would stand unharnessed, doors would lack fittings, scribes would lose covers for their precious books, and knights would discover that armour without straps is mostly an expensive pile of complaints. Still, the tanners live at the edge. Their workshops stand downwind when the town has any wisdom, near water because the work demands washing, rinsing, soaking, and disposal. Respectable folk need them but prefer not to dine beside them. The same hands that make a lord's fine glove are not always welcome near a lord's table. Useful labour, you begin to understand, may be honoured in payment while avoided in person. The world is very good at needing what it wrinkles its nose at. A broad-shouldered tanner notices your expression and laughs softly. He has a beard stiffened by damp and smoke, and his apron is patched with pieces of old hide. He says strangers always make the same face, as if they expected roses to grow in the lime pits. Then he points toward the river, where a narrow stream of cloudy water runs from a yard into the current. The river takes everything, he says. The river is patient. The potter murmurs that rivers are patient because they have nowhere else to be. The tanner tells you some swear the smell of hides keeps certain sicknesses away, because no pestilence would willingly enter such a place. Others claim the opposite, that corrupt vapours rise most fiercely where dead skin, standing water, and foul mixtures gather under rain. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The tanner himself shrugs and says his father lived to 60 with both hands and most teeth, which in this world serves as a persuasive argument. He wears a little charm of boar bone at his neck, not against the smell, he says, but against knife slips and bad bargains. Near one shed, smoke pours from a low fire where hides are cured and stretched. The smoke is thick, woody, almost comforting after the pits, and for a moment you breathe it gladly. Then the wind shifts and returns you to reality with the efficiency of a monk correcting posture. A woman in a coarse wool hood works beside the frames, rubbing oil into leather with steady circular motions. Her hands are strong, red at the knuckles. She hums while she works. A tune nearly lost beneath scraping blades and the slap of wet hides. A child beside her sprinkles ground bark into a tub with solemn importance. Medieval towns are full of such hidden arrangements people place near the wall, near the river, near the smell, so others may enjoy cleaner streets, warmer boots, finer saddles, safer doors. Fear of bad smells shapes the map itself, but fear does not stop the work. It only pushes it outward, names it necessary, and then pretends distance is virtue. The rain starts again for a breath. No more than a thin mist. Drops gather on hanging hides and fall into the troughs below. The brown dog approaches a pile of trimmings, receives a shout from 3 directions, and returns to you deeply wronged. You pass a stack of finished leather undercover smooth, dark, oiled, almost sweet-smelling compared with the pits. The transformation feels like a small rough miracle. From rot and soaking and scraping comes something durable, useful, almost noble. Even foulness you handled with knowledge can become service. You move on along the river edge, boots sinking softly in wet mud. Behind you, the tanners return to their work, stirring pits, hauling hides, feeding fires, keeping their trade secrets in smells most people will not brave long enough to learn. Ahead, the river bends toward open road and distant shrines, its mist rising pale over the fields. You breathe through your vinegar cloth once, then lower it, carrying with you the lesson of the quarter. That bad smells frighten because they speak of decay, but they also reveal the hidden labour that keeps the world fastened, shod, bound, and moving. You follow the river road until the tanner's smoke softens behind you and the town begins to loosen its grip. The wool remains at your back, grey and damp under the lowering sky, while ahead the path bends through winter fields flattened by rain. Bare hedges shine with droplets. Rooks lift from a furrow, black scraps against the pale afternoon. Your boots are heavier than before, each step carrying a little of the town's mud, and the brown dog keeps close beside you. Perhaps wiser now after being scolded by tanners, though not so wise that he ignores every interesting smell along the ditch. The pilgrim walks with his head slightly bowed, one hand on the strap of his satchel, the pewter scallop badge tapping softly against his cloak. He says there is a shrine not far ahead, where travellers stop before taking the road across the low fields. The place is known for a relic, though he lowers his voice when he says it, as if the relic might hear and take offence. The potter asks what saint it belongs to, The pilgrim pauses, a finger, perhaps, or a tooth, or a thread from a burial cloth. No one can quite agree whether it came from a martyr, a bishop, a holy woman, or a chest that was already suspicious when someone opened it. You pass a willow stump and see the shrine soon after a little stone shelter set beside the road, roofed with old tiles and leaned into by ivy gone dark for winter. A wooden cross stands before it, crooked but stubborn. Beneath the arch burns a small lamp, its flame trembling in a red glass cup. Around the shrine gather a handful of travellers, 2 women with baskets, a lame man wrapped in a patched cloak, a young clerk carrying a leather satchel, and 3 pilgrims with badges sewn across their hats like little metal arguments for heaven's attention. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not the river, not leather, not wet wool. Sweetness. Incense. Frankincense, if the shrine keeper is telling the truth, though perhaps a cheaper resin stretched with dried herbs and smoke. It curls from a clay dish near the lamp, rising blue and soft into the cold air. Rosemary and juniper smoulder beneath it, giving the sweetness a sharper edge. After the tanner's quarter, the scent feels almost impossible, as if someone has opened a window into a warmer country. The brown dog sniffs once, sneezes, and sits down with the expression of an animal who does not trust foreign policy. An old woman tends the shrine. She wears a dark wool gown, a linen veil, and a fur cuff patched at one wrist. Her hands are thin but steady as she feeds another crumb of resin to the ember. Beside the lamp rests a small reliquary box of wood plated with tarnished metal, set behind a little grill. Through the grill you can see only cloth, a twist of pale bone, and a bead darkened by age or handling. The shrine keeper says the relic gives off sweetness on certain mornings, especially before rain, feast days, or trouble. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which mornings count. Travellers kneel one by one, touch the stone threshold, cross themselves, and leave what they can, a pin, a farthing, a bit of candle, a heel of bread, a ribbon, a whispered promise. One of the women places a little bundle of dried lavender before the grill and asks protection for a child with a winter cough. The lame man lifts his cap and bows his head. The clerk, who smells of ink, damp parchment, and self-importance not yet fully earned, squints at the relic as though trying to read it. Perhaps he's deciding whether holiness has proper documentation. The pilgrim kneels too. You stand behind him, feeling the incense thread into your cloak, mingling with vinegar, smoke, lavender, river mud, and all the long layers of your journey. The old woman notices the cloth from the monastery and nods approvingly. Vinegar for corruption, incense for devotion, rosemary for memory, juniper for cleansing. Each has its place, she says. Some swear sweet holy fragrance drives away foul vapours, because corruption cannot bear the breath of sanctity. Others say the scent comforts the frightened heart, and a steadier heart survives cold roads better than a trembling one. Even now, it is hard to tell where medicine ends and prayer begins. The shrine keeper leans close and tells of a summer many years ago when fever passed along the river villages. People came to the shrine carrying vinegar rags, onions, rue, and little wax candles. The air in the sick houses had turned sour, she says, thick as spoiled milk. But here by the relic the wind smelled of roses, though no roses bloomed nearby. A man was healed after sleeping under the shrine wall. A child stopped coughing after her mother tied a thread from the lamp to her sleeve. A miser donated a loaf and found his lost cow, which may be holiness, luck, or simply proof that cows enjoy dramatic timing. The potter listens with polite doubt. He buys a small pinch of incense ash wrapped in cloth, not for himself, he says, but for his sister's house where the bedding has smelled damp all winter. The shrine keeper tells him to place it near the hearth, not in the soup. This advice seems unnecessary until you remember the onion dish in the alehouse and the many strange uses people find for hope. You kneel at last. The stone is cold beneath your knees. The incense smoke moves around your face in slow folds, sweet enough to soften the memory of middens and hides. You do not know whether the relic is truly what the old woman claims. Perhaps it is a saint's bone. Perhaps it is a sheep bone in a silver mood. Perhaps faith has polished it into power through all the hands, prayers, tears, fears, and coins laid before it. No one can quite agree whether a relic is proven by its origin or by what people become while trusting it. A bell sounds faintly from the town behind you, softened by distance and wet air. The shrine lamp trembles. The pilgrim murmurs a prayer for clean roads and clean breath. The clerk scratches a note on a wax tablet, no doubt preparing to be uncertain in excellent handwriting. You rise slowly, and the dog rises with you, shaking damp from his ears. As you move from the shrine, the incense follows only a little way before the road's colder. Smells return earth, ditch water, wet wool, distant smoke. Yet something of that sweetness remains tucked inside your cloak, small as a coal wrapped in ash. You carry it onward with the vinegar cloth and the monk's rue, with the scallop badge glinting beside you and the road opening toward the fields, where evening already gathers in the hollows and every breath feels like a story half believed. You walk on from the roadside shrine while its last sweetness fades behind you, and the world ahead becomes plain again winter fields, wet hedges, dark furrows, and the long low road running between them like a strip of old cloth. The incense does not vanish all at once. It lingers in the fold of your cloak, tangled with vinegar, rue, lavender, smoke, leather, and the stubborn town smell that no prayer has fully persuaded to leave. The pilgrim keeps beside you, quieter after kneeling before the doubtful relic, and the potter carries his little packet of incense ash as carefully as if it might either bless his sister's hearth or escape into the ditch. The afternoon grows colder. Rainwater left in cart ruts begins to skin over with thin grey ice, not strong enough to bear weight, only strong enough to crack under your boot with a brittle whisper. Frost gathers along the dead grasses. Rooks move over the fields, calling from one bare tree to another. The brown dog trots ahead, nose low, tail making small hopeful motions whenever the road offers him news. You envy his faith in mud. He seems to believe every ditch contains either a feast, a mystery, or someone else's poor decision. Beyond a bend, you hear voices. Not shouting, exactly, but that tight, weary sound people make when wood, iron, weather, and time have all chosen the same hour to become difficult. A cart stands crooked by the roadside, one wheel sunk deep in the mud, where the verge has collapsed under it. Two peasants bend beside it, a broad woman in a patched brown cloak, and a thin man with a wool cap pulled low over his ears. A boy holds the horse by its bridle, whispering encouragement into its steaming nose. The cart bed is covered with sacking, tied down with rope, and beneath the cloth you smell grain, damp straw, onions, and the faint sourness of something that has been stored too long in a cold place not cold enough. The pilgrim goes to help at once, because pilgrims, like monks, are often moved by duty, hunger, and the hope of being welcomed at the next fire. You step down into the muddy verge with him. The potter sighs, tucks his incense packet deeper into his coat, and follows. The woman nods thanks without wasting words. The wheel has cracked near the hub, and one peg has worked loose. The cart has not broken entirely, which is almost worse, because it remains full of opinions about whether it wishes to continue. You and the pilgrim push while the man lifts with a pole, and the woman works the wheel with hands reddened by cold. The horse shifts, snorts, and drops its head as if embarrassed by the whole profession of transport. Mud sucks at your boots. The brown dog contributes by standing exactly where no one needs him, then darting away when the woman tells him he is as useful as a spoon in a hayfield. The joke is small, but the boy laughs, and the sound warms the road for a moment. At last the wheel rises enough for the man to wedge a flat stone beneath it. The woman hammers the peg back into place with the side of a hatchet. Each blow rings dully through the cold air. The cart settles, not confidently, but with the resigned balance of an old pilgrim's knee. The man breathes out and crosses himself. He says the road has been soft since the rain, and soft roads eat wheels. The potter says wheels should have more sense than to trust roads. No one disagrees. While they bind the cracked hub with a strip of rawhide, you stand near the cart and catch again that sour stored smell beneath the sacking. The woman notices your glance and lifts one corner. Inside are sacks of barley, a few turnips, onions, dried peas, and a small chest of smoked fish wrapped in cloth. Winter food. Not fine, not fragrant, but precious. She says they are taking part of the manor store to a smaller holding where the roof leaked and spoiled half the grain. The Lord's Reeve will count every measure, she adds, as if numbers can make mould repent. The man spits into the mud and says spoiled grain smells before it shows itself. First damp straw, then sour bread, then a mouse nest bitterness. If the rot goes deep, he says, even the chickens turn away. Some swear that grain gives warning because God puts a voice in useful things. Others say old women know the scent because hunger has taught them better than priests ever could. No one can quite agree whether a bad smell foretells famine or only reveals neglect already committed. Either way, everyone listens when the storehouse turns sour. You ask about the storehouse, and the woman describes it while tightening the rope over the cart. Thick oak door, iron key kept by the reeve, floor raised on stones if the builder was wise, straight on damp earth if he was cheap, which is common enough to be called traditional, grain bins lined with boards, herbs sometimes scattered to keep weevils away, cats encouraged with milk, charms scratched above the threshold, crosses, circles, sometimes a little burn mark from Candlemas flame to guard against rats, thieves, and the evil damp that creeps like a poor relative and never leaves. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which charm works best, though everyone agrees a good roof is holier than a bad one. The boy says his grandmother hangs dried tansy in the grain room and sets a bowl of salt near the door to drink foulness from the air. The man says salt is better used on fish. The woman says both may be true, and that men are always surprised when two truths fit in one room. She ties the last knot with a sharp pull. Her cloak smells of hearth smoke, onion skins, cold milk, and sheep wool. It is the smell of a household fighting winter by inches. You help push the cart back onto firmer road. The horse leans into the traces, hooves slipping once, then catching. The wheel turns with a complaining creak, but it turns. Everyone pauses as if listening to an old man decide whether to keep living. Then the cart moves, slow and uneven, but forward. The woman breaks a coarse loaf and gives pieces to you. The pilgrim and the potter. The bread is dark, dense, and slightly sour, but good against the cold. She gives the brown dog a crust too, though she tells him not to boast. He takes it beneath a hedge and immediately boasts with his whole body. You eat beside the road while frost thickens along the wheel ruts and the sky lowers toward evening. The conversation fades into quieter things, fields under water, rents due at Martinmas. Whether onions keep better braided or buried in sand. Whether a mouse in the storehouse is worse than a lazy cat. When the cart finally creaks away, you watch it go, its patched wheel turning carefully beneath the weight of winter food. The sour smell of damp grain remains in your nose, humbler than tannery pits or sick room air, but no less frightening. Bad smells are warnings in this world because they speak before disaster has a face. They tell of rot in the bin, mould in the roof beam, illness in the bedding, hunger walking toward the door. You pull your cloak close, touch the vinegar cloth in your sleeve, and follow the pilgrim down the frosted road while the distant bell from the town fades behind you like a memory of smoke. The road rises after the cart has gone, lifting you from the wet low fields toward a ridge where the hedges grow thinner and the wind has room to comb through your cloak. Evening is not yet here, but the day has begun leaning in that direction, with pale light stretched over the furrows and a smoky blue gathering beneath the trees. Your bread sits heavy and comforting in your stomach. The sour scent of damp grain still lingers in your nose, and whenever the wind shifts, you catch from your own sleeve the faint sharpness of vinegar and rue, faithful little guardians against everything the world might breathe at you. Ahead a keep stands above the road. It is not enormous, not the kind of castle that minstrels build with their tongues after too much ale, but it is strong enough a square stone tower, an outer yard, a timber gate, a ditch dark with rainwater, and smoke rising in several thick columns from kitchens and hearths. Its walls are patched where old stones have been replaced by newer ones, and its roof lines bristle with crows. The pilgrim says the Lord's household keeps a feast tonight for visiting kin, and travellers may sometimes find leftover bread, a place near the outer fire, or at least a refusal delivered under shelter. The potter brightens at the word feast, though cautiously, as a man brightens near a dog he has not yet decided is friendly. You cross the ditch bridge under the gaze of a porter wrapped in a fur-lined cloak. He asks your business, looks at the pilgrim's badge, looks at the potter's hands, looks at you as if measuring how much mud you intend to donate to the yard, and finally waves you through. The brown dog slips in with such practised innocence that the porter notices only after the animal is already inside. He sighs, but does not chase him. A castle preparing a feast has larger enemies than one hopeful dog. The yard is alive with work. Boys carry split logs toward the kitchen house. A groom leads a steaming horse beneath an awning. A maid crosses with a basket of trenchers, thick slices of stale bread that will serve as plates for those important enough to receive food but not important enough to eat from silver. Smoke coils from a low building near the hall, and from that doorway comes a smell so rich after the road that your whole body pauses roasting meat, onions, dripping fat, ale, pepper, wood smoke, hot bread. And underneath, faint but present, the sour corners of stored things, damp rushes, old grease, and something in a covered tub that everyone is politely pretending not to notice. The kitchen is a world of heat. You duck inside behind a servant carrying kindling and feel the cold road fall from your face at once. Flames leap in a wide hearth where spits turn slowly over coals. A boy sits on a low stool, cranking one spit with the grave misery of a child who has discovered that roasted meat smells best when it's not yet yours. Birds hang from hooks. A haunch of venison darkens near the fire. Pots bubble on iron hooks, one thick with pottage. Another bright with a sauce of wine, vinegar, onions, and spices. The air shines with smoke and fat. Everywhere, hands move. A cook with bare forearms and a linen cap shouts for more salt. A maid pounds herbs in a mortar parsley, sage, thyme, and perhaps hyssop. Another scrapes trenchers clean of crumbs before laying them in a stack. A scullion hauls water, slopping half of it across the stones. Rushes lie thinly near the doorway, already darkened by wet boots. The cook's table is scrubbed pale in the centre, but along the edges old stains hold fast, brown and black. A history of feast no song bothers to remember. The pilgrim stands aside, humble and hopeful. The potter examines a cracked jug near the wall with tragic sympathy. You watch as the cook lifts a cloth from a bowl of fish and sniffs sharply. His expression changes by no more than a breath, but everyone nearby sees it. He tilts the bowl toward an older woman who seems to command the kitchen without needing to raise her voice. She sniffs too, then shakes her head. "The fish goes not to the Lord's table," she says, "nor even to the servant's pot." The brown dog hears this and steps forward with optimism. She points at him with one finger and says, "Not that either." No one can quite agree where the line lies between meat that is well hung, meat that is strongly seasoned, and meat that has begun writing its will. In noble kitchens, spices can hide many sins, and vinegar can wake tired food into one last performance. Some swear pepper and cloves cleanse what is doubtful. Others say bad meat remains bad meat even if dressed like a bishop. The cook mutters that a feast is only as safe as the nose of the person willing to ruin it. You breathe through the heat and understand the strange tension of the room. This is luxury. Yes. More food than any peasant family sees at once. Meat turning before flame, white bread for the high table, beeswax candles waiting in a chest, imported pepper locked in a small coffer-like treasure. Yet fear walks here too, quiet and practical. A spoiled sauce could shame the household. Sour ale could anger a guest. Rotten meat could send fever into the hall. Fresh rushes must be scattered before the diners enter, but old rushes beneath the table still remember spilled gravy, bones, dog paws, and winter damp. A servant brings in baskets from the storehouse onions, dried peas, apples wrinkled from storage, and loaves wrapped in cloth. The older woman checks each quickly, trusting her fingers and nose more than anyone's promise. One apple is cut open and found brown at the heart. It is tossed aside. A small loaf smells of mould and is sent for pig feed. Even in a castle, nothing is assumed safe merely because it has a lord nearby. Decay does not respect heraldry. Mould has never once paused before a noble seal and thought better of itself. The hall beyond the kitchen begins to glow with rushlight. You glimpse servants laying trenchers, setting cups, shaking herbs among the fresh floor rushes to sweeten the air before guests arrive. Rosemary and meadowsweet are scattered where boots will crush them. The scent rises briefly, green against smoke and stone. Some swear that sweet herbs underfoot keep quarrels mild and stomachs settled. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether herbs calm men, mask dogs, or merely give the steward something to praise before the first cup is spilled. At last the older woman gives you each a heel of bread dipped in hot sauce and a scrap of roasted onion. Not charity exactly, but the overflow of a kitchen too busy to measure kindness carefully. You eat near the doorway where cold air slips in and smoke slips out. The sauce is sharp with vinegar, rich with fat, and warm enough to make your fingers grateful. The brown dog receives nothing official, yet somehow finds a crumb near your boot and treats it as proof of divine order. As dusk thickens outside, the feast begins to stir toward the hall. Platters lifted, candles lit, doors opened, voices rising. You remain at the kitchen edge, watching luxury pass by in steam and firelight, carrying with it all the hidden labour of sniffing, scraping, salting, boiling, trimming, sweetening, and fearing. Bad smells frighten even the wealthy because beneath silk, fur, silver, and song, the body is still only the body, helpless before rot once it enters the breath. You pull your cloak around you, hold the last warmth of sauce on your tongue, and listen as laughter blooms beyond the wall, bright over the deeper smell of smoke. You do not enter the feast hall itself. That world belongs to cleaner sleeves, brighter belts, better names, and people whose boots have not recently argued with midden lanes, river mud, and a broken cartwheel. Instead, you remain near the outer yard, where the kitchen warmth fades into night and the castle settles into its rougher breathing. Behind you, laughter rises from the hall in bursts, softened by thick timber doors. Before you, the yard darkens under a sky of low clouds, and watchfires burn near the gate, their smoke moving sideways in the cold. A servant gives you permission to sleep near the outer fire if you keep clear of the stable door. Do not trouble the porter, and do not feed the dogs anything that belongs to the kitchen. This last rule is spoken while looking directly at the brown dog, who sits beside your boot with the injured dignity of a pilgrim denied a relic. You promise nothing on his behalf. He has the look of one who treats human law as weather inconvenient, temporary, and sometimes avoidable. You cross the yard toward the watchfire. The ground is packed earth, slick where rainwater gathers and hard where frost has begun returning. Straw has been scattered near the stable entrance, and the warm smell of horses rolls out whenever the door opens. Hay, leather harness, damp mane, oats, and the deep animal comfort of bodies large enough to heat a room by existing. A groom carries a bucket past you and tips water into a trough crusted with ice at the edges. Above the stable lintel hangs a small iron horseshoe, nailed open-end upward to catch luck, or downward to pour luck on all who pass, depending on who explains it. No one can quite agree, and the horses appear unwilling to comment. At the fire, 2 guards sit on low stools with their cloaks drawn close and spears resting nearby. One is the same man who helped save the cart at the gatehouse, now dry except for the boots, which seem to have entered a long marriage with mud. The other is older, broad in the shoulders, with a beard singed shorter on one side, perhaps by accident, perhaps by winter boredom. A third man, not a guard but a wandering knife grinder by the look of his wheel and bundle, sits near the flames warming his hands. The pilgrim is already there, his scallop badge catching little sparks of firelight. The potter lowers himself beside him, sighing in the particular way people sigh when the ground is cold but not as cold as elsewhere. You sit too, heat touches your shins, smoke threads into your cloak, joining everything already stored there: vinegar, rue, rosemary, incense, tannery, damp grain, feast smoke, wet wool. By now, your cloak is less a garment than a travelling archive of medieval anxiety. If a scholar ever studies it, he will need strong lungs and a forgiving saint. The guards speak softly, as night watchmen do. Loud words feel wrong after dark, when sound travels oddly between walls and every corner seems to listen. The older guard feeds the fire with split oak and says the wind has shifted from the marsh. The younger one lifts his head and sniffs. You do the same. Beneath smoke and horse warmth lies something wet and cold, a green-black scent from low ground beyond the castle ditch. Marsh breath, ditch vapour, the smell of standing water, rotted reeds, frog mud and old leaves drowned slowly. Some swear that such night vapours creep closest after sunset, when the sun no longer burns them thin. They say marsh air carries ague, chills, shaking fevers, and dreams full of drowned faces. Others say fever belongs to bad water, bad food, crowded beds, or God's mysterious accounts, which no man can balance ahead of time. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the marsh truly breathes illness, or whether people, frightened by darkness and damp, give the smell a body so they may blame it properly. The knife grinder says he once slept near a fen road and woke to see blue lights bobbing over the reeds. Marsh candles, he calls them. Corpse lights, says the younger guard. Lanterns of wandering souls, says the pilgrim, though gently, as if not wishing to offend any wandering souls within hearing. The older guard spits into the fire and says lights over marshes are mostly tricks, gases, or thieves with lamps. When asked how he knows about gases, he shrugs and says, "Old mud has habits." Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but all of them lean a little nearer the fire. Above the yard, the hall windows glow gold behind horn panes. Music leaks out a reed pipe, a small drum, the dull cheer of cups meeting tables. Then the door opens, and a servant comes out carrying a tray of scraps toward the kennels. Warm feast smells pour briefly into the cold roast meat, pepper, onions, wine sauce, fresh bread, melted fat. The brown dog lifts his head so quickly that his ears seem to arrive a moment late. The servant points at him and says he is not invited to negotiate. The dog watches the tray go with the grave sorrow of a monk seeing a library burn. The fire settles lower. The guards pull their cloaks tighter. One wears a little pouch at his throat filled with dried betony and garlic. He says his wife insists on it whenever he takes the night watch, especially when the wind comes from wet places. Garlic, she says, frightens bad air, witches, worms, and certain neighbours. The older guard says it frightens companions too, but a living companion is better than a sweet-smelling corpse. The joke drops quietly into the coals and glows there without disturbing the night. You warm your hands and listen. A bell sounds from the castle chapel, smaller than the monastery bell but clear enough to mark the hour. You remember the suspicious monk opening shutters against stale warmth, the shrine keeper feeding incense to the ember, the peasant woman speaking of spoiled grain, the cook refusing doubtful fish. Everywhere, people fight the air in their own way. Guards burn oak and garlic. Monks steam rosemary. Alewives set onions by the hearth. Cooks trust the nose before the spice box. Pilgrims carry badges near the throat. Fear travels, but so do remedies. The younger guard tells of an unlucky wind from the north that once blew smoke back into every cottage of his village for 3 nights. Afterward, 3 old men took fever, a cow dropped her calf early, and every candle in the chapel burned crooked. The potter says old men take fever because old men are old. Cows are private in their sorrows, and candles are always looking for drama. Still, he touches the incense packet in his coat before settling back. The sky lowers. Frost whitens the cart tracks in the yard. Servants cross now and then with lanterns, their feet quick, their shadows long. One shakes fresh straw into a corner for late sleepers. Another empties a pail beyond the wall and returns holding it far from her skirt. The castle, for all its stone strength, remains a place of bodies eating, sweating, breathing, fearing, sleeping close beside one another in wool, straw, smoke, and hope. At last you lie near the fire, your cloak folded beneath your shoulder, the dog curled against your legs as if he has held this post since creation. Smoke drifts over you, not sweet, not clean, but familiar. Beyond the gate, the marsh wind moves in the dark. The watchmen murmur, a spark lifts, fades, and vanishes before reaching the low clouds. You breathe slowly through wool scented with vinegar and smoke, and the night gathers around the castle walls, full of unseen airs, old legends, unlucky winds, and the steady comfort of men keeping watch beside flame. You wake in the grey edge before dawn, when the watchfire is no longer flame but a red, breathing heart beneath ash, and the castle yard lies quiet under a skin of frost. For a few moments you remain still, wrapped in your cloak, with the brown dog pressed against your shins and the smell of smoke settled deep in the wool around your face. The feast has ended. The laughter behind the hall doors has sunk into the heavy silence of sleep. Somewhere, a horse shifts in the stable. Iron shoes knocking once against stone, and from the chapel tower comes a small bell, clear and lonely in the cold. The younger guard stands near the gate, stamping his feet softly to keep warmth in them. The older one crouches by the coals, feeding in splinters of oak. His garlic pouch hangs at his throat, dark against his tunic. He nods when you sit up, and tells you not to wander near the inner passage, for the sick room is guarded this morning. A kitchen boy took fever in the night, he says, and one of the Lord's visiting men has been coughing since supper. The word fever changes the air more quickly than smoke. No one raises his voice. No one jokes at first. Even the dog lifts his head, ears pricked, as if the word itself has a scent. You rise, stiff from cold, and follow the pilgrim toward the well, where servants are already drawing water. The rope creaks over the pulley. A maid cracks ice from the rim of a bucket with the heel of her hand. Another woman carries folded linen against her chest, her face half covered by a cloth soaked in vinegar. She passes quickly, eyes lowered, heading toward the inner door. From within comes a faint stirring feet on rushes, a latch opening, someone whispering for more candles. You do not intend to go close. Yet the path to the outer wash place passes near the sickroom passage, and curiosity in a medieval castle is like smoke. It finds cracks even when not invited. A steward stands before the doorway with the servant beside him, barring easy entrance. The servant holds a shallow bowl filled with vinegar and sprigs of rosemary. The steward's nose is red from cold or worry. He tells a groom to stay back. He tells a scullion to fetch more clean water. He tells everyone. Twice, not to crowd the passage, for crowded breath makes foul air thicker. The door stands open a hand's width. Through it, you glimpse a narrow chamber with whitewashed walls, low beams, and a bed set near a shuttered window now thrown wide to the winter dawn. Cold air pours in, lifting the smoke from beeswax candles placed near the bedposts. The candles burn steadier and sweeter than tallow, their warm scent mixing with vinegar, rosemary, steam, damp linen, and the sour human smell of fear. A brazier has been moved close but not too close, for stale heat is suspected. The suspicious monk from the monastery would approve, though he would no doubt find 3 things to correct before breakfast. Inside, an older woman bends over the kitchen boy, who lies under wool blankets with his hair damp against his forehead. She is not a physician in the grand university sense, but she has the serious hands of someone who's seen more sick beds than most physicians have seen clean ink. Beside her rests a small wooden tray, a horn cup, a spoon, linen strips, a bundle of sage, a charm written on parchment and tied with red thread, and a glass jar in which leeches drift slowly in water. The leeches look calm, almost scholarly, which is unfair in creatures with such intentions. The pilgrim crosses himself. You do the same, partly from faith, partly because everyone nearby is doing it, and in a sick passage one does not wish to appear careless before heaven or neighbours. The old woman lifts one leech with a small piece of linen and places it near the boy's arm. He does not wake fully. He only murmurs and turns his head toward the open window, where dawn air touches his face. Some swear that letting blood releases bad humours and draws heat from fever. Others trust herbs more. Others trust prayer most, though they still send for the woman with the leech jar when the skin grows hot. No one can quite agree whether healing comes by skill, saint luck, or the body's own tired bargain with the morning. At the far corner, a young servant sprinkles fresh rushes over the old floor covering, then quickly gathers the darker, dampened reeds into a basket. She works with her mouth covered. The old rushes smell of sweat, spilled broth, wet shoes, and long hours shut indoors. Once lifted, they release a tired breath into the room, and the steward steps back sharply. He orders them burned beyond the wall, not left near the stable or tossed into the kitchen midden. Bad air, he says, breeds where sick straw lies. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he fears the straw itself, the fever it has witnessed, or the thought that illness might cling to humble things and wait for the next warm body. A charm is whispered over the threshold. The parchment tied with red thread is hung near the bed, beside a sprig of rue and a tiny wax cross. The words are too soft for you to hear fully, though you catch the names of saints and the shape of a plea. The older woman rubs the boy's wrist with vinegar steeped in herbs. Another servant holds a peeled onion near the window, cut open to draw corruption as the alehouse widow claimed her dish did. The onion sits there bravely, sharp and pale. Promoted overnight from soup to guardian. The visiting man in the second bed coughs into linen. At once, two people move away without seeming to move too quickly. Courtesy survives, but caution stands closer. The man's own servant waves a little pomander near his face, pierced metal filled with cloves and rose. Its sweetness struggles against the sour heat of the room. Wealth, even here, makes a private cloud, but fever does not bow low simply because spice has travelled far. You stand in the passage, breathing through your vinegar cloth, and understand that cleansing the air is not one act, but many small ones repeated with tired hands. Open the window, burn the candle, change the rushes, steam the herbs, wash the linen, hang the charm, set the onion, pray, bleed if told, drink if able, hope if nothing else remains. Each gesture makes the invisible feel slightly less powerful, as if danger can be given edges by work. The bell sounds again, and the sky beyond the open window turns from iron to pearl. The boy stirs beneath his blanket. The old woman touches his brow and says his heat has not climbed. It is not a cure, not yet. But the steward exhales as though some small door has opened in his chest. The dog noses your hand, impatient for the world to continue being full of roads and crumbs. You step back from the guarded sick room, carrying with you the mingled smell of beeswax, vinegar, cold air, herbs, and human worry, and as the castle wakes around you, you feel how fragile clean breath is, and how faithfully people labour to keep it. You leave the guarded sick-room passage as the castle fully wakes, though the quiet fear of it follows you into the yard. Dawn has passed into a pale winter morning. Servants cross between kitchen, stable, and hall with baskets, buckets, and folded cloths. The porter opens the gate for a cart of firewood. A groom shakes frost from a horse blanket. Near the kitchen door, yesterday's feast bones are sorted for broth, dogs, and whatever uses remain after the rich have finished calling something supper. Nothing is wasted if hunger is nearby, and hunger is always close enough to hear its name. The pilgrim stands near the well, fastening his satchel. The potter has already decided to return toward the town, hoping to sell a few small cups before the market thins. You follow with them, because the road has circled you through smells of fear and comfort, and now it seems only right that it should carry you back toward the gate where your journey began. The brown dog trots ahead, rested, fed by luck, and entirely convinced that he has guided everyone wisely. At the castle gate, the older guard touches the garlic pouch at his throat and nods farewell. He says the kitchen boy may yet do well if the fever breaks before night and the air stays clean. Some swear that a room must be aired just as carefully after sickness as a church after burial, with windows open, rushes burned, bowls washed, and candles kept bright until dawn. Others say a strong body needs little more than broth, warmth, and a saint who is not otherwise occupied. No one can quite agree, but the guard looks relieved when the wind shifts away from the marsh. You cross the ditch bridge and take the road down from the ridge. The day moves slowly, as winter days do, never hurrying even when shadows lengthen. Frost melts in the cart tracks, then gathers again where the sun cannot reach. The fields lie flat and dark on either side, with crows stepping through furrows like ink-stained clerks inspecting a badly written charter. The potter carries his incense ash. The pilgrim carries his scallop badge and the calm weariness of a man who has slept in too many places with questionable bedding. You carry everything else in your cloak. By afternoon, the town wall rises ahead again, its stones dull under a low sky. Smoke lifts from inside the walls, blue and brown, and the river mist begins returning before evening has earned it. You pause outside the gate, just where you stood the night before, and for a moment the whole journey seems folded into one breath. Dung carts, fresh rushes over old rot, alehouse onions, midden steam, vinegar sleeves, monastery herbs, spice stalls, rain in the gatehouse, tanner's pits. Incense at the doubtful relic, sour grain, castle kitchens, watchfire smoke, beeswax in the sick room, and the soft footfalls of the dog who has adopted your boots as parish property. The gate guard is the same young man from the market morning. His scarf still smells faintly of cloves. He lifts a hand to the pilgrim, jokes that the dog owes toll by now, and lets you pass beneath the arch. The town inside is quieter than before. Market boards are being folded. Fish stalls are rinsed for the last time. A woman sweeps onion skins into the gutter. A boy carries a bundle of rushes on his back. And a priest hurries past with a small covered vessel. Perhaps holy oil. Perhaps wine. Perhaps something no one in the lane feels bold enough to ask about. Evening gathers softly in windows. Horn panes glow amber. The chapel bell rings, not loudly, but with a round, familiar sound that seems to settle on roofs and shoulders. You pass the shrine where the soot-dark saint still watches the lane. The cut onion from yesterday is gone, replaced with a little spray of rosemary and a candle stub. Someone has scratched a small cross into the wax. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such gestures change the world or merely steady the hand that makes them, but in the trembling light, the difference feels less important. You reach the far gate as dusk thickens. The road beyond the walls runs toward a small meadow used by travellers when the weather is kind enough to pretend. A few fires already glow there. A cart stands under an ash tree. 2 pilgrims share bread near a ditch. Someone has hung damp socks on a stick too close to the fire, proving that mankind's faith in optimism remains dangerously strong. You choose a place a little apart, where the ground is dry beneath old leaves and the town wall blocks some of the wind. The pilgrim shares the last of his bread. The potter shares a strip of hard cheese. You fill a wooden cup with small ale from a skin, sour but welcome. The brown dog receives a crust, then curls near your feet with the deep satisfaction of a creature who has solved the world. Smoke rises from the little fire. It smells of damp twigs, old bark, and comfort. You add the monk's rosemary sprig to the edge of the coals, not enough to waste it, only enough to let its green scent breathe into the dusk. For a moment, the air grows clean in a small circle around you. Behind the wall, the town exhales bells, muffled voices, a cartwheel, a baby crying, a door bar dropped into place, pigs settling somewhere they should not be, and the last thin call of a merchant hoping to sell one more candle before dark. You breathe slowly. The fear of bad smells no longer seems foolish. It feels human. In a world without microscopes, without clear causes, without certainty, people read the air as best they can. They fear rot because rot often tells the truth. They fear foulness because sickness hides inside ordinary breath, and still they answer with herbs, fire, prayer, washing, fresh rushes, vinegar, incense, onions, bells, charms, careful noses, and stubborn hope. Now the road quiets. The town becomes a low shape against the deepening blue. The river mist slides gently along the ditch, pale as wool teased thin between fingers. Your cloak is heavy with the day's many scents, but the smoke from the fire softens them, and the rosemary gives them a green edge, like a memory of the monastery garden. The pilgrim's head bows. The potter wraps his hands in his sleeves. The dog sighs against your boot, and his breathing becomes a small, steady rhythm beside the crackle of the fire. The bells sound once more behind the walls, slower now, farther now, as though the town itself is growing sleepy. You let your shoulders drop. You let the cold move around you without entering too deeply. The firelight touches the mud on your boots, the hem of your cloak, the pilgrim badge beside you, the vinegar cloth folded in your sleeve, the last crumb of bread in your palm. Everything is simple now. Breath in, breath out, smoke above, earth below, a soft dog at your feet. A guarded town behind you, a dark road waiting, but not yet asking you to walk. And as night settles, the old fears loosen. The bad air, the foul lanes, the damp straw, the sickroom door, the hidden rot in grain and meat and river mud all drift away from you, not forgotten, only quieted. The world becomes smaller than danger. It becomes the red heart of the fire, the wool around your knees, the slow rise of smoke, the patient stars appearing one by one above the town wall. You are tired, but you are here. You have passed through smoke and sourness and sweetness, through bells and warnings, through human worry and human care, and now there is nothing more required of you. The last rosemary leaf curls in the warmth. A soft green scent lifts, fades, and blends with the night. Somewhere beyond the wall, a shutter closes, somewhere in the meadow. A sleeper turns under a wool blanket. The dog dreams, one paw twitching gently, perhaps chasing crusts through a kinder kingdom. You close your eyes. The medieval world dims around you, not vanishing, only lowering its voice. Stone, straw, candle, cloak, river, road, bell, breath. All of it settles into darkness. All of it becomes still enough for sleep. Rest now. Let the fire keep its small watch. Let the town breathe behind its walls. Let the road wait until morning. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. And the night, at last, smells only of smoke, rosemary, damp earth, and peace.